Happy holidays, AJ Hinch. How are you?
Sutton, how are you, buddy?
Very good to see you. Say hello to my producer and co-host, Danny.
Hi, Danny. How are you?
I feel like this is a reunion, and I can't say anything funny or cool or throwback between you two.
You can, because if I got some stories. If you got some stories about this co-host of yours,
Man, I got some stories.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I traveled with him. And though age-wise he's a little younger, there was definitely some big brother watching out, even though he had 30 other guys he had to look out for. So
yeah, I don't have any sons, but I got like 30 of them on my team, so it's like
yeah, you do.
Plenty.
So this AJ is a PG podcast. Casual is the word of the day for sure. JP Massey is the other bigger guest. He's a high prospect with University of Minnesota.
Right.
The podcast is called Amateur Hour. And so in our discussions, it's you and I have done this on radio before. I think we want to crack your head open a little bit on, your experiences as a young amateur, but then also kind of the scout in you. We like to feel like kids that are parents or anybody who's listening to this gains a little bit of wisdom, and the wisdom you can provide is pretty epic. So that's kind of the goal of this thing, just to give you a heads up.
All right, awesome.
Any warm-up questions you have for him, D?
Yeah, I just wanted to, potentially bring up the conversation you had with Tiger Woods and wondered if you remembered the conversation.
Which one?
Oh, he goes, which one? The one when you were in school with him.
About the one about playing golf?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can. Yeah.
Okay. And then my other one is just about your psychology degree. Was that a conscious choice you made, or was that you were like, oh, it's easy, or how did you make that choice?
It was a morning major, and if you missed practice, Marquis would kill you at Stanford. So it was convenient in the sense it was the morning major. Then I got into it. I got into sports psychology, child psychology.
Yeah.
Having 2 daughters, I need that portion of it. Having 28 sons on a team, I need that portion of it. Pitchers are whack jobs, so I need that part of it. So that's kind of been my usefulness of psychology 101.
Cool. Okay. Those were the 2 I had, Darren.
Yeah, all those are good. Hey, that's good.
Okay, cool.
I'm ready when you guys are.
I'm good. Let's rock.
All right. You rolling, D?
I am rolling.
Hello, AJ Hinch, and happy holidays to you, man. We appreciate you spending time with Danny and I. This is cool. We feel fortunate to pick your brain just a little bit on behalf of the young athlete and their parent and their coach. I guess I'll start with a little bit of a warm-up, an appetizer. How much of you, the major league manager, is still the player development guy, is still the scout that talks with scouts, and even, the amateur game, looking at the amateur game? How much of the manager is still and will always maybe remain that guy?
Yeah, I think it's a part of everything that you do in this job as a manager, because you're looking out on a field of players, and nowadays teams are built, with a variety of different type of guys. There's guys at the beginning of their careers, guys at the middle of their careers, guys towards the tail end of your career or their career. And they're all at different development parts of their lives, just as men, as baseball players, as their skill sets and things like that. So you got to be pretty versatile in this job to see that. You definitely respect it. To ask the same out of a rookie shortstop as you will a Hall of Fame caliber first baseman, very, very different. So for me, I think I'm always evaluating players, because I'm usually calling up to the front office and saying, love this guy, may want to upgrade here. On the player development side, these guys are developing all the time. And whether they're young, whether they're old, they need a little bit of that flavor of player development.
So as a manager with Arizona, as a manager with Houston, and now with Detroit, do you ever find yourself, and look, you're in the middle of the season, so I get this, but do you ever find yourself curious about the draft, reaching out to the guys in the room, stopping by the room, learning about high school player A, B, and C? Look, you're so far away and away, but do you find yourself inquiring, and will you in the future?
Well, I do it all the time. I mean, I love the draft. I've been involved in the draft from my high school days. I went through it as a high school senior, went through it as a college junior, a college senior, ended up signing. And then when I got into baseball post playing, it was all about the draft come June and now July. And it's fun to stop by that room. I do think there's a connection between the major leagues and the young kids. And I've had a couple of guys that have come back that came through the system as draftees, when they get drafted, they get brought to the big leagues and they get to come say hello, and they remember that first meeting with the manager, that first meeting in the dugout when they say hello to you. And so I value that. And then kids are coming to the big leagues so fast nowadays. I mean, I watched Alex Bregman at LSU face Aaron Nola. Have Aaron Nola at Texas A&M, and then 2 years later, I'm managing him in the big leagues. So it can happen fast. The 20-year-old Carlos Correa, who makes his major league debut, when you and I were together in Arizona, 19-year-old Justin Upton makes his debut. So be careful that you think this draft is too far away, because that talent can get to the big leagues very, very quickly. We have the 3rd pick in the draft this year in Detroit. I don't know who it's going to be, high school, college, pitcher, position player. But I know that guy's, got a great chance of making it to the big leagues while I'm the manager in Detroit. And so that relationship starts right then, the day that you get in front of him. And the more information you have about him, the more successful that relationship will be. So I'm always perusing. I'm looking up guys. I don't weigh in with too much opinion because I'm not the one pulling the trigger, but I love the puzzle piece that has to be put together when you're building a team.
So you mentioned, being drafted out of college, and you elected to go to school. You turned down the draft out of high school, and you also chose a degree in psychology, and learning a little bit more about that because, it fit better with your schedule, but also you're kind of, as a catcher, a team psychologist, whatever terminology you want to use, but that is definitely true. You're in tune with everyone and you speak to everyone in certain ways. And I also know now you have Chris Fetter on your staff, who is a huge mental guy that I think that, I want him to write a book. I feel like he's so in tune with that part of the game. So from your education at Stanford, psychology, playing the position of catcher, and now joining the Tigers, and a guy like Chris Fetter, how do you use all of that combined to be more forward thinking with your players and realize that how things have changed since you were drafted?
Well, first off, Chris Fetter is really busy, so he can't write a book for you. So he's got a day job that he's got to get Casey Mize right and Tarek Skubal right. So don't be offended if he turns down your book deal.
Okay.
But when you're in a management position, meaning manager, or in the front office, or a pitching coach, or head of a department, it is literally trying to get the best version of that person out of himself. And with players, sometimes you have to convince them of their strengths. Sometimes you have to let them handle failure in their own way. But what I've found over the years is being a mental coach is a huge advantage. When I grew up, and nobody likes back in the day when I grew up, the mental side of the game was often overlooked. And now it's to an extreme. I've got guys that reach out different ways, trying to make sure they have that mental edge in order to perform their best on the field. So the evolution of sports psychology in general, I've seen go from kind of taboo all the way to expected out of everybody. On top of that, the reality is that our sport is built around failure. No matter how good you are, no matter how talented you are, no matter what numbers you put up, you're going to fail more than you're going to succeed. That's painful for a person in general. It hurts usually you're the best player on your high school team, the best player on your college team. You're the best player on the A-ball team all the way up through the minors. Most of the stories aren't that way. There are some outliers that aren't that way, but they don't reach failure until they get to the big leagues for the most part, unless there's an injury and they have to overcome it as an amateur or in the early minor leagues. We're constantly handling players that are handling failure. So psychology turned out to be a great degree for me. As a catcher, you are kind of the field general. It's why a lot of us become managers, is where we deal with pitching side and the position player side. But most importantly, we deal with the human side. And that's the part of the game that was underdeveloped over the last 20 years, has evolved. And as the numbers have caught up, we're seeing a pretty balanced game.
When you think about your development from going from player to being on the other side, and do think about how the mental game has changed for those who are listening, we've got parents listening, we've got the players listening, the prospects. What would you say to the prospects who want to improve that part, but also how much does that go into scouting, that you're paying attention to their mental game?
Well, just in general, nowadays, there's so many teams that are eliciting tests on the psychology of a player. They're learning the characteristics of the person to complement their skill set. We can show it, we can use a stopwatch for a lot of things. We can use a radar gun for a lot of things. Now we can measure everything that you do on the field. The one thing you can't measure is what's going on up here. So that my message to the players and the parents is, number one, it's okay to seek help. It's okay to talk to a professional, to talk to somebody more advanced, someone that's been there, done that, maybe failed on their own. I see that as a strength in trying to make yourself the best version of yourself at any given time. The second part of it is that it's going to be expected that you're going to have to be tough up here in order for you to be successful out on the field. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be handed to you. There are hundreds and hundreds of players that enter the game any given year. That means 100 multiple exit the game in that same year. So it's a very, very difficult business to be successful. So why wouldn't you cultivate that mental side, that how you deal with failure, sometimes how you deal with success? It's you get to read a lot of sport clips now that back in the day you didn't have to read about yourself. You didn't have Twitter, you didn't have Instagram, you weren't told and how great you were the entire time. So now we're dealing with success, we're dealing with failure. Sometimes people outside the family or outside of your bubble is necessary in order to give yourself a realistic look at what you got to do to be successful as a player on the field.
So that brings to mind, and it's going to go back to what you said earlier about stopping by the draft room, meeting, occasionally the scouts that are helping, meeting a player when he's a first, second, third round pick. That guy might have been in history class a month ago. Now he's meeting the manager of, in this case, the Tigers, right? So it kind of puts the notion away that the top field general is not aware of you in high school. In this case, let's say for you at Midwest City High School, they are aware of you if you're an elite player. So the next case I have, be a scout for me again, AJ, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. What are my controllables? If I walk up to a quad at a PG event, knowing I have 2 games in a day, or I'm walking up to my high school field, I hop out of my car, what are my controllables? Because if I'm facing a guy who's got some major game, I mean, that the game has to be played out, right? But in your mind, kind of what are my controllables, either away from the field or when you're watching me in those bleachers?
Sure. Well, I mean, away from the field, it's definitely your nutrition, it's definitely your strength training, it's the repetitions that you're getting, not just the number of repetitions, but the quality of repetitions that you're getting. But one thing that I think gets overlooked a little bit in this is what you can control when you walk into that environment. Like I'll throw you back when I used to walk onto Team USA in Millington, Tennessee, prior to my Olympic team. I would walk out there. The only thing I had was how strong am I? How fast am I? How good a shape am I in? My arm strength and my routine. And that routine is critical whenever you get into an environment where you're uncomfortable. You're just going to get challenged again when you get to the big leagues. That routine is all you can really control. Whether it's, you watch golfers, you watch quarterbacks, everybody does the same repetition over and over again for their routine. The key for baseball, that's extremely important because you're going to be put in uncomfortable environments, whether you're staring out at somebody throwing 98, 100 nowadays, or whether you're the pitcher and you look up there and that 6'2", 225 guy named Mike Trout is in the batter's box. You're going to have some routine that collects yourself in order to perform. So you can control that in any environment that you're in. You can't control what I think of you. You can't control as a pitcher. You can't control what happens after the ball leaves my hand. You can't control the defense. That's why they have these wonderful metrics like FIP that can got to get it out of the way of everybody else but you. Just what happens with what you control, where I throw the ball and the spin that I put on the ball. Cool. As a hitter, the pitches that I swing at, the contact that I make, I can somewhat control if I react correctly. I can't control what happens out in the field. So, but it comes back to, like, in its raw ingredients, your routine is going to carry you from high school all the way to the major leagues. If you're willing to stick with it, change it when you need to, alter it to more successful habits off the field. Keep your nutrition, keep your fitness, keep your mind right, stay out of the messes and the distractions that happen. Those are like lecture topics that I would give young players and young coaches to accomplish what you want in this game.
It's amazing. I have folks that I've been in the room. I was lucky enough early in AJ's career to be in the room when they made decisions on athletes, when guys would fight for them on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday morning before the guys arrived at 6 a.m., guys up on the chalkboard, and some of those tiny things came into play. I want to put on notice all our travel and high school coaches, and heck, it can be Little League. I don't really care. And I guess I want to ask you, AJ, what advice you would have for those that are out there, essentially in some ways, and I mean it's very respectfully, but doing the same thing you're doing. You're taking a collection of men, or if it's softball women, young women, and all these other factors in their lives, whether it's millionaires or whether it's guys worried he got a C- on his test, it still weighs on his brain, right? What advice do you have for coaches out there dealing with young athletes, as someone who still does, maybe just a few years older? Just a couple of nuggets you would have for those coaches that may drop this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things first off is you got to let players be players. You got to let them be themselves, and the cookie cutter days, the one size fits all style of coaching, this is the only way you can hit in the big leagues. I mean, I can show you 50 different stances on elite caliber athletes that hit the ball. Their stance is different. They may get to their foot plant at the same time, and their timing mechanism might be pretty similar, but they're different players. Some are 5'6", some are 6'6", a lot of in between. Let the players be themselves and develop the players that are on your team to their individual best under the umbrella of a team concept. It's critically important. Probably easier for me to do at the major league level because I can flip players out left and right. We can trade them, we can release them, we can sign them to long-term deals. I mean, it's complicated, but let the players be themselves. Secondly, let them fail. You can correct them, but you put them in a position to be successful. Let them experience success. Let them experience failure, and then respond accordingly on how to develop the player. Those are really key to me because I'm not out on the circuit. I don't know all the competition issues and the different things that people are willing to do. But you got to make it about the players. You got to make it about them individually, and ultimately, you got to let them learn the game, succeeding and failing.
I'm looking for a story. I'm hoping maybe you could share a favorite scouting story that you think of often or you refer to often that maybe impacted you, that helped you, that taught you a lesson, something that kind of sticks out in your mind from those days.
Man, there were some really good ones. I mean, from a player standpoint, we didn't have a lot of the tournaments and a lot of the showcases that are done now back when I was in high school. But I remember even in college too, is anytime I'd see a group of men, now it's evolved. Now there's women involved in scouting, which I wholeheartely support. Yeah. But you have a group of baseball people that are now standing off to the side. And you're always looking at them like, are they looking at me? Are they watching me? If I overthrow a ball in between innings, that anxiety that happens. And then if I do something really good and you puff your chest out a little bit. I remember a scout pulling me aside in high school and him saying, you know what, you're good enough. Like, you're good enough. Don't try to overdo it. Don't try to impress anybody. Like, just be you. And that scout was Dave Owen. And Dave Owen, who's now ironically with the Tigers as the field coordinator, he's been a farm director. He played in the big leagues. Dave Owen drafted me. I didn't sign with the White Sox that year, but he told me, you're good enough. Like, don't try to be something more than your best. And that stuck with me as a high school senior, desperately wanting to get drafted, desperately wanting to sign out of high school. I would have missed out on Stanford, would have missed out on the Olympics. I would have missed out on my early years. But that's my story. But Dave Owen entrenched that in me from the get-go. I'm somebody who wanted to be a perfectionist. I wanted to do everything perfect. And I'll always appreciate that. On the flip side, I've tried to do that with some players. Back when I was with the Padres and I was in the scouting department, I oversaw scouting and player development, and it was good to get out in the field and go see players. And I'll never forget going. There's two showcases that I saw, or two main events, so to speak, that I saw. Francisco Lindor faced off against Javier Baez. And if you want to feel like a small scout in the industry, go out to an event like that and look around. You see some big boys in the industry out there watching these two guys. And I had an old time scout that said to me and said, "Hey, which one do you like better?" And I'd ramble through an answer. I like to talk, and I'm like, "Hey, I like Lindor's gracefulness, and I like Baez looks like a powerful guy." He says, "Don't worry about it. They're both getting to the big leagues." And then I just kind of stopped in my tracks and you put you in your place, right away. Like, I don't know whether A or B was better, but they both made it to the big leagues, and that scout was right.
I love that. So, you mentioned like the big groups of people, and that kind of leads me into the next story I'm hoping you can share and shed some light on. 2003, you go to the winter meetings. You're looking for a future job. So, more groups of people standing around who are intimidating, and you never feel like you say the right thing. I'm constantly in a state of chaos at those meetings, but you took it upon yourself to go do that. I mean, paint me a picture of what that was like for you.
Okay, so I got drafted in 1996, was my last draft, and played in the Olympics, and then I ended up signing in 1997. I played in the minor leagues. 1998, I make it to the big leagues. And so I had fast forwarded right to the big leagues, 1 year out of college. I'm facing Pedro Martinez. I'm catching Tom Candiotti, the knuckleballer. By far the hardest debut, I say, in the history of baseball. I like telling that story. That's the hardest debut in the history of baseball, which is why I get punched out a couple of times and I had a pass ball. So totally not my fault. But I joke about it, but then that's only a year removed from college. Now, fast forward, that gave me 5 years to be a good self-evaluator. So when I started going to the winter meetings, I was super curious about the rest of the sport. How did it all operate? The front office side, the intellectual curiosity, how they put teams together, and it was right in my backyard in Arizona. So I didn't travel for it. It was right where I was living with my wife. And so I went up and saw Billy Beane and Sandy Alderson, and Kevin Tower, the late Kevin Towers was there. And, it just such Walt Jocketty, it's just great. Like Dave Dombrowski, just huge names in our industry on that side of the game. And it's just kind of picked their brains a little bit. Part of it because I knew I wanted to do something bigger than playing, or something beyond playing.
Yeah.
The other side of it is I knew that those sliders were not getting easier to hit, and that was bothering me. So I knew I was going to be out of the game if I didn't make the adjustments offensively. So all in all, it was a huge experience for me. I jumped right into the front office after I got done playing. In 2000, I got done with 2005 and became a farm director right away. And little did I know, 3 years later, Sutton and I were going to be in Phoenix, and I became the manager of the Diamondbacks. So what a whirlwind career I've had so far.
And just a quick follow-up, do you feel like that going there and doing that was like really pivotal? Like, do you think you'd be on the track that you are if you didn't do that?
I don't know. I think it's mostly just kind of how I'm built. I mean, I'm intellectually curious about everything. I mean, I want to figure it out, and I want to learn, and I want to see how other people do their job. I mean, I was just suspended for a year, which, was horrible being out of the game, but it gave me an opportunity to watch 30 managers manage and 30 GMs put teams together. And I was in touch with a lot of them, and I'm still close friends with them, but it was interesting to me to take a step back. I always want to learn something, whether I'm pursuing some sort of career or whether I'm in a situation where I didn't have any other choice than to watch baseball last year. And that it's important to be intellectually curious. That's kind of how I've always been. It's how Darren and I developed a nice friendship, and just wondering how the engine operates. How do you do your job? How do I do my job? How do we connect with people? That's the part that I love the most about being in the game.
Hear, hear, my friend. Hear, hear. Growing during a suspended time. I've been there too, and paying attention and learning other parts of the game, or what may be next for you, right? And what you want to do next. My final question for you is kind of a simple-minded one, but I think people would love your opinion because there is no right answer. I think it's just fun looking at your top prospects. If I look at your top 10 on the team you're currently about to take charge of, you see Spencer Torkelson, and I did a little research. This was the 241st ranked player out of high school, right? At Casa Grande High School in Petaluma, California. Casey Mize was in Springville High School in Alabama. He was the 127th ranked right-handed pitcher. But then you get Riley Green, perfect game All-American. Matt Manning, perfect game All-American. Daz Cameron, perfect game All-American, right? Boom, high school, go. It's just amazing the impact that college can have. And you're a testament to that too, although you were a lot higher ranked than those two guys. But boy, there's such a value. And with the evolution of our sport and the shrinking of the minor leagues, I think college baseball, and you chose it, but college baseball is now, even in junior college level, more important than ever.
Well, I think it's important. I love college baseball. I think that it's such an individual question that you have to ask yourself.
For sure.
When you get to the draft, right? So there's financial implications. I remember standing in front of Carlos Correa, the first pick overall, when he was in Puerto Rico, and it was 100% that he was going to sign. And the type of money that was being offered to him, any of us, don't have a problem with him signing. The maturity physically and emotionally that players need to have and demonstrate in order to take that leap into a great cities around the country, but a professional life is just so much different than that ramp of growth that happens when you go to college. I have a college age daughter. She's a freshman. I don't want to just throw her out in an apartment in a big city. I want her to go to college and have that graceful entrance into adulthood, right? But, when you're good enough, some of these guys make it to the big leagues at 18, 19, 20 years old. I totally get it. And I know, we're not biased one way or the other. No team is ever biased one way or the other. It has to be college. It has to be high school. But they have to be mature, and they have to be able to handle the road that's ahead of them in order for them to reach the big leagues. It's nice to be a professional player. There's all I wanted to do growing up was be a professional player and get to the big leagues. But now as a parent, I look back and go, man, I'm glad my parents were pretty firm with me that the best decision for me was to go to college. The best decision for me was to get an education and go to Stanford, develop as a player under Coach Marquis, Hall of Fame, coach out at Stanford. The relationships that I built, the life that I got to live, the things that I was exposed to, my lifetime friends that I had there. I'm very pro college in that environment. But it gets tough. It gets tough because teams, we offer a lot of money and a lot of opportunity, and we dangle that carrot as a dream. But we need to make sure that college baseball is in line with what we're doing in professional baseball. We're not competitors. We're all interested in developing talent, cultivating people, developing the human, and ultimately finding the best of the best that get to come up to the big leagues and perform in front of everybody for 30 teams in the big leagues. If we can all agree on that, then we will grow our sport in all facets, and the right players will choose college. The right players will sign out a pro, and we'll get the best of the best when they get to the big leagues.
Yeah, I did have one more, if that was okay, just based
Sure.
on what you just said, to the parents who, we see a lot at these events, and, some are in the back and they're watching and letting their kid do their thing. Some are in the stands and they're pretty vocal. Just kind of hearing what you said about, parents and what they did for you, to the parents who are listening and who are concerned about their kids, in a pandemic. They're concerned about their kids, whatever it may be, when it comes to making that decision, like what now and heading into 2021. Like, what do you say to parents today who are freaking out about their kids or concerned about that?
Well, I'm freaking out about the pandemic too. I mean, no one likes what we've gone through in 2020, and certainly, my daughter, like I said, has enjoyed her freshman year in the comfort of our house, which is good for the parents, not so good for a freshman wanting to spread her wings and fly a little bit. I mean, the opportunities are going to be there. There's not one way to make it to the big leagues.
Yeah.
There's not one path or one, sort of formula that you have to be in the big leagues by age X. I can give you examples of 30-year-old rookies. I can give you examples of high draft picks, low draft picks, superstars that were made felt like from the womb. They were going to be superstars from the day they picked up a bat. To me, it's about the individual, and the opportunities are going to be there. But one of the things, again, I want to urge parents and coaches is let them succeed and let them fail. I'll give you a quick little story here from when I was a farm director and assistant GM in San Diego. I go out to A-ball. We're in Fort Wayne, Indiana, one of the best places you can go watch an A-ball team play. And we go to Fort Wayne, and I have Max Fried there. So I think 7th or 8th pick overall, probably a high school All-American, incredible. He and Lucas Giolito were the two best high school pitchers that I saw in my short scouting career. Max Fried got knocked around for 5 runs in the first inning, and his dad was sitting nearby, and he was squirming in his seat. He's very nervous. And we just watched Max Fried have an incredible season in Atlanta. Cy Young votes, anchored a pitching staff that was 1 win away from the World Series. I was really happy that he got beat up that day in the first inning. And while his dad's squirming, I'm like, yes, like he's going to learn how to push through that lack of strike throwing. He's going to be able to push through that every pitch that I throw over the plate's getting, crushed on line drive after line drive, and they're spraying the ball all over the field. Failure's good. You have to push these guys to the point of where they understand what it takes to the difference between success and failure. Learn from your failures and develop your strengths for your successes. That to me is a key lesson as you start to plan for your child's future. Just don't think they have to be perfect. They call it perfect game, but it's not perfect, and neither is your child. Unfortunately, this game will expose that, and it's how they respond to that is going to be how successful they are.
So now you're going to write a book with Chris Fetter, right? When you guys are
I'm pretty busy right now, but there'll be a book.
Retired.
Exactly.
That was awesome. That's I love that story. That's a great story.
Awesome.
I'd like to help you write a chapter or two of that book.
I hear you. You know a lot about part of that book. I know that.